Good evening, everyone. Back on the Hard Compound live. I've got a few people tuning in already. Thank you very much to everyone who's joining us so far. In case you don't know, we're a motorsports fan page. We also do promotions for young riders and all things motorsport. We love it. So if you know anyone who wants to join in, come and join us. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the Hard Compound. That's where we are. Tonight is the latest in a series of interviews that we've done with various folk from the motorsport world. We've spoken to Rob and Bradley Gravitt a couple of times, which is fantastic. Ollie Jackson's joined us on a couple of occasions. Every time we speak to him, he wins. So we might have to get him on more often. So congratulations on your second win, Ollie, if you see this. We've also spoken to Michael Crease and Jade Edwards, Ryan Falconbridge, Alex Neville, all on the BTCC Toker package, which has been absolutely fantastic. And as part of the Hard Compound's first birthday celebrations, we've also spoken with Ari Lyondike, Derek Warwick, and Tom Coronel. So we've had some pretty good people on, which we're very happy with. So if any of those are watching and seeing this, thank you very much as always. But tonight we have a guest with a bit of a difference. Not only is she partial to a bit of driving and racing herself, she's also best known possibly for the media side of things that she does, media training and work in the Formula One paddock for many years, in interviewing drivers, working in PR, marketing, and all that good stuff. And she's currently on the British Touring Car Championship coverage, doing the interviews on ITV4, and we actually called her the Queen of the BTCC for that reason. So, without any further ado, we're going to bring in Louise Goodman.
Minus my crown. I don't have a crown.
Has it slipped? It's fallen off.
It obviously has. Hello, hi everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Yes, I echo that, and thank you, Louise, very much for joining us, sparing your time. I know you're busy with all kinds of things, so thank you very much for coming and joining us and being part of the rather prolonged birthday celebrations that we're having.
My pleasure.
Wonderful. So, first off, how are you, and how was lockdown, and are you looking forward to the new one?
I'm all right, thank you. Lockdown 1 was a lot better than I think lockdown 2 is going to be shorter, but lockdown 1 was in the summer, so my garden is looking fabulous now. I've done my raised veg beds, and I was like everybody else, I got out doing stuff in the garden and got a good suntan. But it's been a strange old year, hasn't it? But looking forward, I'm really glad that despite lockdown 2, the final race of the touring cars can happen. That was a concern for a little while, but obviously as an elite sport, we're allowed to go ahead. So that's good news, really good news.
Yes, one last motorsport hurrah in the UK, yeah. Which is good, because it kind of would have been a shame to miss out on that. We were actually going to be there, but obviously not anymore. So named. But yeah, very, very glad it's all going ahead, and all the support is as well. It's always good to see. Yeah. You have a bit of a bonanza, and you get to hang out with Paul O'Neill a bit more, which you can't knock, can you?
Well, the downside to it.
I wonder if he's going to watch this. Right, we'll see. But yeah, I mean, did the first lockdown affect anything that you were doing? Obviously, you do a lot of media training.
I work disappeared basically. I do a mixture of obviously the telly stuff, my media training, which is largely face-to-face. So I'm doing some online sessions now, but it's largely face-to-face. So that all stopped, and then working at events. I was due to work at Goodwood. Obviously that didn't happen, and so yeah, all my work disappeared for a few months. But listen, there are people in a worse place than me, so can't complain too much.
Yes, definitely. There's some people that have really struggled, haven't they? So yeah, us not being able to watch the motorsport and losing a few pennies, it's not quite so bad as what other people have been through. Fully agree.
Yeah. I live in the countryside, I've got green space around me, so I can get out and about with the dog, and so it wasn't so bad.
Yes, better than being cooped up in the middle of a city or in a flat or with no outdoor access. That must have been awful. So yeah. Oh, I've just seen a very nice comment pop up. There just isn't a better team in the motorsport broadcasting than the ITV BTCC gang. There you go.
Do you know what? It's such a nice gang as well. I mean, I know we all take the piss out of Paul, and rightly so, but you know, it's all done with love. It's a really, really nice team to work with. You know, Paul's endlessly entertaining. Steve Ryder, you see a bit of it, but Steve has the most incredibly dry sense of humour. He's so funny. He kind of just drops one-liners here, there, and everywhere, and it's just a really nice guy. And actually, because of the way that we're working this year, you know, we're all in our little sort of, we're locked in the TV compound. So I'm actually seeing a lot more of them than I would ordinarily do. So we're in our little truck. I've got my little, what I call my little box at the end of it, my little studio. But then David, you know, Tim, Owie, Richard, John Neal have all got their little sort of commentary positions. So we're kind of hanging out all day together because there's nobody else to play with. We're all sort of locked in there. So as I say, I've seen more of them than I would ordinarily do. So it's been a giggle.
And it's not a bad group to hang out with, is it? I think there's worse people in the world to hang out with. So
absolutely.
No, definitely agree. Right, as we usually do with these interviews, very standard kind of format. We'd like to just start at the start, really. How did you first get into motorsport? Obviously, it's such a male-orientated world. Less so now, which is great. I mean, what sort of first switched you on with it?
I don't honestly know. I mean, I fell into working in it. I never set out to work in it. I always liked things with wheels and an engine. You know, when I was a little kid, I used to, you know, I can remember sitting on my dad's knee and doing the, you know, steering the car around various picnic areas in the New Forest. And, you know, one of my great thrills as a kid was being allowed to park the car in the garage when my dad got home from work. But I never set out to work in motorsport. My family weren't particularly into it, although I grew up in the same town as Derek Warwick in Alresford. So I knew about Derek. I used to walk past Warwick Trailers, which was the family business, on my way to school, and knew that was there. I mean, Derek was stock car racing at the time, so it's before he got into Formula One. But you know, used to read about him in the local paper, and there was somebody who worked there who had the coolest Mark II Ford Capri that was always parked outside. So I just like cars and bikes. A lot of my misspent youth was sort of misspent on the back of motorbikes and hooning around fields in cars and stuff. So but I never set out to work in it. It all really just came about by circumstance. I was working as a journalist for a powerboat racing magazine, and was actually at a lady I worked with was having a barbecue, and I met Tony Jardine there. So people may recognize the name. Tony, you know, has sort of been around in motorsport for many years, and he was just setting up his own PR company. And I went to work for him, basically as his kind of, well, a bit of everything, really. So with Tony, we launched, actually, Derek was our first client when Tony set up the company. And we launched the Campbell sponsorship of the Lotus Formula One team. So that was interesting, trying to do that, having conversations with North Carolina, where Camel were based, RJ Reynolds. And we kind of have to unplug the phone and plug the fax machine in. And, you know, it was all very early days. Tony had like a brick of do you remember the brick mobile phones? And that was
the one just holding two hands.
It was all a bit fly-by-wire.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was my entree into the motorsport world, basically.
Okay, right. And I do have a note here that you were working for an architecture practice in London, and you just thought, don't fancy this? Was it basically that, and you just?
No, I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I left college. I didn't really know. I just didn't have a clue what I wanted to do, so I just moved up to London and got a job as a secretary, just to earn some money, basically. And then I went off traveling. I went to stay with some friends in America who their family business was building offshore powerboats. Through that, met the lady who was editing a powerboat racing magazine, and then moved back to the UK and started working there. So I went, but this is kind of pre, you know, there was no such thing as a degree in journalism at this time. You kind of learnt your journalism on the job, either for a local newspaper or for a magazine or that kind of thing. So, yeah.
And that was your kind of little background, and then like you were lured back to the UK for the motorsport PR.
Yeah, so, well, that was for Tony. So I started working for Tony, did the launch of Camel, and then I went off traveling, which I was always intending to do. I went for work for Tony. Basically, by this point I was editing the powerboat racing magazine, and I wanted to go away traveling. So I kind of wanted a slightly easier job. Don't tell Tony that, but said when he was setting up the company would be a slightly easier job. So I did that so I could get an evening job as well to earn more money. So I set off, and I actually worked for Tony when I was down in Australia. He came down and worked at the Australian Grand Prix in Adelaide. So I worked for him there. And then he got in contact with my parents and said, when's Louise coming back? I kind of need her back now because the company's growing. And I said, well, I wasn't going to be back for 6 months. So we agreed on 3 months. And then I came back and started working for him again.
Okay. Oh, so well, it's nice to, nice to be in demand, I suppose, isn't it? Nice
exactly. Yeah. He was a great guy to work for. I mean, it was a young company. It was fun. It's really interesting, actually. A lot of people who I worked with then have gone on to, I mean, Hayley Maxfield, who was my assistant when I was there, she went on to be in charge of the World Rally Championship. She was the FI press officer for the WRC. Deborah T, who I also work with, she now runs a very successful PR agency, and so there were lots of people who went on to do good stuff.
Yeah, it's obviously lots of good people around at the time, which is always good, of course. So Formula One, obviously that's a world that a lot of people would love to be involved with. I know, and I literally just fell into it. So my first time I was working for Tony. So I was traveling around Australia. I arrived in Adelaide on the back of a motorbike with one bag with just, like a few grotty clothes. I'd been on the road for a year at this point, so a few grotty clothes in it. And then was kind of whisked into the Formula One pilot. So that was my first experience of working there. It was, I was quite naive, really. I mean, when I was working for Tony before I went away, as I said, we'd launched the Camel sponsorship of Lotus. And it was when they had Ayrton Senna and Satoru Nakajima working for them. So we did the whole pizzazz, big launch, which Steve Ryder coincidentally hosted. And then I was looking after the one-on-one interviews with Nakajima, and Tony was looking after them with Senna. And at one point, Senna disappeared. More journalists, funnily enough, wanted to speak to Senna than wanted to speak to Nakajima. So Senna disappeared. So Tony said, go and find him. So I went backstage, and Ed was backstage basically taking off his overalls. And all I knew was, like, my boss had just said, go get Senna. So I walked up to him. This shows my naivety. Grabbed the seat and went, not finished yet. And took him back. And I was so shocked at being manhandled by this young bint that he'd never come across before. That he was kind of, you followed me back out there, and so it was one of the, my naivety was extreme, and in fact I found it quite intimidating when I was my first job, big job for Tony in the paddock, was looking after all the sort of ancillary sponsorships. So Camel sponsored Lotus, but they also sponsored LaRousse and Benetton and various other teams. So I had to go around collecting quotes from all of those drivers. And some of the drivers just terrified me. Nelson Piquet used to tease me mercilessly, and I was just a young kid and really did not know how to handle him. And there were a couple of others. Alessandro Nannini, he used to flirt outrageously, just taking the mickey with me because he could see he is very Italian, isn't he?
Blushing and not knowing what to do. And I was quite naive in those days.
Yeah, it must have been quite amazing though to think, wow, I'm in the middle of the F1 paddock here. Obviously it's work, but you must have. Did you ever stop and just think, wow, this is pretty cool?
I think I was more concerned about the fact that I wanted to be taken seriously. I was there to do a job.
Yeah.
And don't give me that kind of thing. I don't want to have people taking the mickey out of me. And so I never sort of stood there and thought, oh my goodness, look at this. I just thought, oh my God, I've got to get a quote from this guy. And he's pissing me about and he's not, coming out the engineering briefing and stuff. So no, it was more a case of, I was very compact. I mean, you say, it's a male-dominated sport. I would counter that because I think it's by numbers, yes, there are clearly a lot more men working in the sport. I think there's a lot of women are interested in the sport, and more women coming to work in the sport. But back then, I mean, you were literally you could almost count on the fingers of, if not one, then two hands, the amount of women that were working in the paddock. So I was conscious of the fact that as you walk through the paddock, you could see like the guys in the garage just kind of going like, nudge, new, with a bird, a new bird kind of thing. So I was like very, I can only that. I'm here to do a job kind of thing. The boys, in one of the teams, they used to, suddenly, every time I went in there, it was like nobody knew what the time was. I'd go in and they said, have you got the time, Louise? And I'd say, yeah, it's 3:30. Okay, thanks. 10 minutes later, have you got the time, Louise? Yeah. And of course, I suddenly realized what they're doing. They're just taking Mickey out of me. So I went back, have you got the time, Louise? I said, yes. 4:45. And they don't justice.
Asking. Just see a question pop up, which is actually going to be something I was going to bring up soon. You've obviously interviewed a lot of people with the Sky Sports coverage. Good question. Probably one you've been asked many, 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 many times. Who's the biggest well-known racing driver you've ever interviewed? I guess that's big in stature, not sort of wide. I think that probably means.
The fattest racing driver you've ever spoken to. I mean, I guess it define who you would say is the biggest. I mean, obviously, Schumacher I interviewed on numerous occasions. Lewis is the most successful driver, and I was lucky enough to get the first interview with him when he won his first championship. So, I mean, you could pretty much say anybody who's been racing over the last 20 years, 20 plus years, I guess I've sort of interviewed them. It's been I've been lucky in that respect. And some of the old drivers coming back, Prost, PK, they turn up in the paddock every now and then, so you grab an interview with them whenever you could. So yeah, I've been very lucky in that respect.
Yeah, that's some pretty big names there. Obviously, most of us haven't even been within 100 yards of them, but no, very cool, very cool. I've seen another question pop up, which I'm going to come to a bit later on. Simon Steele, who joined in for the Ari Lyndike interview, so thank you for coming back. We'll come to your question soon, Simon. I've just seen that you've worked in media, sort of like media relations for a good number of some pretty big names in the Formula One world. I've just got a little list here. You got like Mika Hakkinen, Jean Alesi, Johnny Herbert, Martin Brundle. Whatever became of him? Eddie Irvine, Rubens Barrichello.
They were all sponsored by Campbell at one point. So Mika and Johnny obviously were at Lotus together when Lotus had Campbell sponsorship, and Martin I was with at Jordan. So yeah, Eddie Irvine, Rubens Barrichello. I mean, if we're talking about the Jordan drivers, we got through them at Jordan. That was one season we had about 7 or 8 different drivers over the course of the year. So they worked with numerous of them. So yeah, so that's what I did. So I started out, obviously, once I started working for Tony, that was doing PR for teams. I worked for the Leighton House team and then moved from there to Jordan. And before that, with Tony, looking after various drivers as well. So yeah, lots of them over the years. Trying to get racing drivers to do PR stuff, that's always entertaining.
Oh, yeah, I guess I just want to
drive and go. Not do it, Lars. Yeah.
Just not do it, yeah. I mean, something that has always interested me is obviously working within a team and then moving to another team. And I spoke to Derek Warwick about this. He mentioned earlier, we had a chat with him about moving teams and how those moves came about. How does it come about sort of behind the scenes, as it were, going, because you worked for Jordan and you did some for Leighton House, who I'm going to shamelessly plug here. There we go. Showing my age with a t-shirt. One of my favourite teams is when I was young. How do those moves come about? Do you just have someone from another team coming over and saying?
Kind of. I worked for Leighton House and I was working for Tony Jardine at the time. So we had BP as a client. BP were one of the big sponsors of Leighton House, and as part of that sponsorship, they funded me as the press officer for the Leighton House team. So I actually was working for Tony at Jardine PR during the week, and then I would just join the team at weekends. So, and the guy who was running the team at the time, who actually, people often ask me, is if you ever, have people sort of making sexist comments. And so there was a guy called Ian Phillips who was running the Leighton House team at the time. And when Tony told him, listen, I've got this girl who's going to come and be your press officer. And Ian said, nah, don't want a girl. Tony said, well, she's all right. She's quite good. She knows her stuff. And he was like, I don't want to go. Just be disruptive. And Ian said, well, Tony said, no, you're going to have her. Just see how it goes. And Ian, to his credit, I mean, he's still a good mate. He then moved from Leighton House to Jordan, and he was kind of instrumental. I'd also worked with Eddie, actually, because Eddie, when he had the Formula 3000 team, before we ever got into Formula 1, they were sponsored by Cal. So that's when I came across people like Lacey, Martin Donnelly. So that switch really was quite easy to do, because I knew Ian, I knew EJ already. So that was an easy switch to make. And they're the only two teams I ever worked directly for. I went from Jordan to working for ITV. So
and certainly two of the most colourful teams in terms of
That's for sure. Yeah.
Well, both in literal colours and with the personnel that were involved. I mean, Eddie Jordan, I mean, what was it like working for him? He comes across as being quite difficult, but absolutely brilliant as well.
He was on the golf course in Spain, so he would disappear off to Spain for the whole summer with his family. So that was great. We could all breathe a sigh of relief. We'd see him at the races, and Eddie is such an endearing character. Eddie is one of these brilliant bosses who does your bloody head in, but at the same time, he's really skilled at getting. You want to work for Eddie. You want to work hard for Eddie. You have a lot of fun with Eddie. He's as much fun as he is exasperating. So he would do our head in at times. We'd come into the office and just cause, and you'd be saying, Eddie, just piss off. Just go back to your own office. Just get out now. And he would just, in fact, I was interesting. I was listening to a podcast which Eddie sent through to me, listen to my podcast, and he was talking on that about the fact he likes being disruptive. And he does it very well. He's had years of being disruptive, but he's hugely entertaining. And as I say, you just kind of want to work for him. Eddie is the kind of guy who he and Ian would go. So Ian was the commercial director at Jordan. And Ian and Eddie would go into meetings, and Eddie can be absolutely blinding for 5 minutes, but then he just starts talking bullshit. So it will get to the point where, oh, come on, you've heard him on television, bless him. So Ian,
brilliant.
Eddie would do the hard sell, and then we'll get to the point where Ian would just like kick him under the table, because he could talk himself into a deal in 5 minutes, but give him another 5 minutes and he'd talk himself out of it with his bullshit. So they made a great double act. So Ian would like wham him under the table, like, shut up now. Let me close this deal. Just stop rabbiting on. And honestly, we'd go to sponsor dinners, and you'd have big long table of people from. I remember him doing it at a Unipart dinner, and Eddie would stand up to make his speech and say, "Lovely to have you all, because I fucking fleeced you. I took your money," and he would just abuse these people, and they loved it. Kept coming back for more, and he was brilliant fun. I still catch up with Eddie every now and then. Obviously doesn't live in the UK anymore, but he's such a good guy. He invited a whole bunch of us who'd worked for him over the years to a do down in London last year, and it was just so nice to see everyone. And EJ he'll never change, and I hope he never does change. He's a blinder. It was brilliant fun to work for. Never a dull moment.
No, I'm sure. And obviously from the outside looking in, he's always looked fun, I think is the word. He's always looked lively. So no, brilliant.
He's not. He's obviously sharp. He managed to do a lot. So, and the deals he pulled off and some of the hustles he pulled were absolutely blinding. He was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant.
Oh, fantastic. Just seen a comment pop up. From working with EJ to working with Paul O'Neill, it sounds like out of the frying pan and into the fire.
Honestly, he's a pussycat in comparison, an absolute pussycat.
Yeah, no, fair play.
No worries there.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so moving on to onto the media side. I've actually taken this from your webpage. I hope you don't mind me saying. It says, due to the invaluable F1 expertise and trust and respect of drivers, excellent, you were offered a job by the ITV team. Was it ITV on the Grand Prix show as the pit lane scurrier up and downer, shall we say? When the offer came in, did you have to think twice about it, or did you think?
Well, it was a bit bizarre. I can't remember exactly how many. There were 5 or 6 production companies. So ITV at the time was still very, very regional, and it only had a small kind of head office, and so it didn't have the production facilities in-house to make the program. So it basically went out to tender. There were like 5 or 6 production companies that were bidding to win this tender. So I was approached by one, MAC1 it was called. It was a consortium of Meridian, which was one of the ITV regions, Anglia, which was one of the ITV regions, and Chrysalis Television. So they approached me, and it was largely actually thanks to James Allen, who was involved with their bid, and a guy called Kevin Piper, who was one of the big sports reporters up at Anglia. And Jordan was in the Anglia region, so Pipes was down at Jordan covering all the stories there on a regular basis. I knew him well. So, and they wanted to have a girl on the team, basically to reflect the fact that a lot of women are interested in motorsport. So they approached me, but it was all kind of just an abstract concept, you know, because they didn't have the deal. So they approached me, and I said, go on, then stick my name down, kind of thing. So, and then about 3 weeks before the tender was due to be sort of announced, I was approached by one of the other companies that was doing it as well. So I was on 2 of the bids in the end, and then the news came out. We were at the Portuguese Grand Prix in Estoril, and the news came out that MAC1 had won, and I thought, oh my God, you know, because what had been an abstract concept then became a reality. Although having said that, they then had to go to Bernie to present their plans, and Bernie had to approve the plans and agree that they could have all the passes they need and all that kind of stuff. So there was a bit of a gap between it being announced and people found out that my name was on the bid, and I was part of the team, and actually then being in a position to formally offer me a job. And by that time, people kind of assumed I was doing it, so I couldn't really say no, if you know what I mean. I think had it been right, this is the thing, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, you know, I would have really thought hard about it, because it's an amazing opportunity. I mean, to be handed that on a plate. But I had no television experience. I'd done a tiny little bit for Irish television, for RTE. When I was working at Jordan, I used to do little reports from the garage for them. But, you know, it was a whole different ball game to when we got to Melbourne for the first ITV Grand Prix. They just kind of gave me a microphone and a set of headphones and said, off you go. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified. And just weird things like when you work for a team, you've got a home, you live with that team, that's where you hang out the whole time. You don't go into other teams, you know, motorhomes or garages. You never go into another team's garage, but you don't even go into a motorhome unless you're asked. And then suddenly I've got a home. I don't have a home in the paddock anymore. Thank goodness Martin was in the same position, because we both went from Jordan. His last year of racing was at Jordan. And then he joined ITV as well. So we kind of both felt the same, and at least we knew each other, because we didn't really feel like we belonged in the TV compound either. So it was really weird that first year, not at all comfortable, because I was patently aware of the fact that I was frankly quite rubbish at it. And, you know, I knew the people and I knew the stuff to ask, but I didn't know how to broadcast, and I didn't have the confidence then. Some people might dispute I know how to broadcast now, but that was another thing. People were like saying, you know, criticizing you, and you think, oh. At the end of the first year, I got to the point where I thought, you know what, my boss is liking what I'm doing, and I'm getting them stuff they wouldn't otherwise have got. You know, the fact that I knew the people at Arrows enabled me to be in the Arrows garage in Hungary, and I was the first one to break. I could just tell from the body language of everyone in the garage. Do you remember the year that Damon was leading the Grand Prix?
Oh, heartbreaking. Yes.
I could just tell from the body language something was wrong, something had come on over the radio. So I went to Annie Bradshaw, who's a long-time mate, said, what's happening? She went, oh, there's a problem. So I was able, I said, can I use this? She went, well, yeah, you can see what's going. So, you know, I was able to, so things like that, I was able to get stuff that other people wouldn't have been able to get, because they didn't know the people. They wouldn't be allowed into the places that I was allowed in. So
okay, no, that was quite sort of cool to be in sort of first hand on that day in Hungary. I remember it well. I was just devastated that day. I was absolutely gutted. Not just for Damon, just for the whole team. You know, they'd been so close, obviously with Derek Warwick. They've been close to winning things, and yeah, real shame. Sorry, my phone's just lit up. I've got a few questions. A lot about interviews. I'm going to just try and rattle through a few of them. What have we got here? What was your most difficult interview? Hopefully not this one.
Some guy who's just had a bad race and is being awkward, basically. You know, but I can understand it. Some drivers there was one driver. Do you know what my most difficult interview was? A driver, and I'm not going to name him, but it was actually at a team event. So they had a bunch of sponsors there from Castrol, and they were being taken into the factory, and then they were looking at some old cars, and then they were in a theatre. And I was doing an interview with the driver, and first time round, so we had to do the interview 3 times around, effectively the same interview. And the first time he was okay, second time he was getting a bit bored, and third time he was frankly a pain in the arse. And he would, I'd say, what, this Castrol? He was like, oh, I don't know, ask the engineers. And you just think, mate, really? They're paying your wages. Come on, make an effort here. So, on the whole, sometimes you're approaching a driver at a really difficult time, and I absolutely get that. And I get that the last thing they want is a microphone being shoved in their faces. So you just have to, it's not personal. They don't hate you. They hate the situation that they're in. So that's just the approach that you have to adopt, really. Yeah,
try not to take it to heart. And on the flip side, who has been the most enjoyable person to speak to? I'm sure there's loads.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't pick one, because different drivers have given me brilliant interviews at different times. I genuinely couldn't pick one.
No, that's fair enough. I think that's...
But no, there's so many. I used to love interviewing Johnny, and I always used to have a giggle. Johnny Herbert, little minx that he was. He could be a little scally at times.
Cheeky chappy.
Really, really cheeky. And we used to, because we'd worked together in the Camel days, as I mentioned earlier on. My first year of doing the ITV job, I have to say all the drivers were brilliant, because I knew them all. They could see I was terrified. They were really good with me. They gave me good interviews. They kind of helped me out. And we're on the grid at the British Grand Prix, and I'm waiting for them to come down live. I'm doing an interview with Johnny, and he suddenly started grabbing me and poking me, and I was like, get off, so then it became a bit of a thing that he'd always try and prod me inappropriately just before they came down live to me to try and put me off. So what we was, up here it was like, and here I am with Johnny Herbert, and underneath I was going, whoa, slapping him and kicking him.
Get off, Johnny. Brilliant. No, brilliant. I've just seen a question pop up from her. This is a horrible, horrible question, especially given that you're currently working within the BTCC, which we'll come to in a minute. I know there's a few BTCC fans tuning in. This is a dreadful question. Who is your favourite BTCC driver? That's a horrible thing to ask, isn't it?
I love them all.
Excellent answer.
I don't honestly.
How can you not?
I don't love them all, to be fair, but I don't have a favourite. I really don't, because I'm. You would obviously, it's human nature. You're going to warm to certain personalities. I know some drivers better than I know others. I mean, people are always and I can see somebody's made a comment about, do I enjoy interviewing Plato? People make comments about, she really likes you, who's your favourite. I've known Jay for years. We've been out on the lash together in Oxford on numerous occasions before I ever started working in touring cars. So people read more into stuff. People always used to think I fancied DC when I was working in Formula One. No, we just, when you've hung out with these guys and been to parties with them and all of this kind of stuff, as we used to do in Formula One, and not so much in touring cars, because obviously you turn up and drive home again straight afterwards. It's not a similar kind of scenario, but no, I genuinely don't have any favourites, because they can all be awkward buggers at times, and so.
Yeah, no thought. I've actually, Tara just popped up on my.
Actually, rather than a favourite interviewee, I love my favourite interview always every year is the winner's interview in Parc Fermé at the final touring car race, because to me that just encapsulates everything that I love about racing, everything I particularly love about the British Touring Car Championship. There's always been some incredible drama involved. There is just you couldn't write the scripts for touring cars most of the time, and it's just that there's always the emotion, and there's the passion, and there's the you can see how much it means to everybody. And I've very often got some bloke in front of me crying, and I'm having to go, don't cry, you can't cry, but I can't help but well up and get totally involved in the emotion of it all. So yeah, so there's your answer. I don't have a favourite driver to interview, but that is every year it's my favourite interview. I just love it. Yeah,
it is. I mean, I must admit, when we were at Brands Hatch last year. You say you can't predict the BTCC, and that finale last year was just the epitome of it. No one could see that coming at the start of race 3. No one thought that was going to happen. I was actually I was actually a guest of RCIB Insurance Racing. So if anyone from there is tuning in, thank you very much. It was a great day. Sean Hollenby, I was speaking to as well. And when you were speaking to Colin after what had just happened in that final race, and he got off the top of his BMW, I was actually standing about 6 feet to your left or right, whichever way you look at it, and you could see that Colin, it was just flooding out of him. He just didn't know what to say. He couldn't quite believe it. So that must have been, yeah, that must have been an amazing thing.
Colin, who is so contained, he keeps everything. You know, he's very measured. That's the way he operates. That's how he gets the best out of himself. And yeah, and then every now and then he goes absolutely mad. I mean, he had no voice. I went to interview him the next day for our kind of ends of season. He had no voice. He said, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened to me there. That's screaming. I've never done that before in my life.
Yeah.
Just the emotion.
It was just, the emotion of it was just amazing, wasn't it? It was just
brilliant. Love it.
I've just seen something pop up. Dave Chambers, he says, I was there with you, Rich. Great day. Yeah, Dave was one of the first people that I spoke to ever about the hard compound, because we only started up about a week ago. So thank you, Dave, for tuning in and sticking with this for a year. Thank you very much. I've just seen another one pop up.
Question: do I prefer interviewing on the F1 grid or the BTCC grid?
I was going to come to that.
Well, I to butt in. Can't help myself. Kind of take an.
No, get in. Go for it. Go for it.
The thing I love about, a lot of people say to me, and I can understand the question, you know, you must miss Formula One, but touring cars is such an easy paddock to work in for me as a journalist. We're a much bigger fish in a much smaller pond. I get that. I get that the Formula One drivers, they have a huge call on their time. There's a lot more media. They've got marketing appearances, as do the touring car guys, to be fair. You know, they'd spend very strict on their engineering time and all of that kind of stuff. But I just, touring car grid, it's just so relaxed. I think the drivers are very aware of the fact that, you know, they are, touring cars and ITV work very closely together. They really appreciate the fact, and I think throughout the entire, all of the support races as well, you know, we kind of provide the oxygen that enables them to go and get the sponsorship. We give a lot of coverage for them, and part of, you know, that visibility helps them to find the funding. It's only a part of it. It's not everything. Not everybody just wants TV exposure, but it helps them. So they, you know, they all want to facilitate our interviews and that kind of thing. I can remember when I first started working in touring cars, I was trying to find a driver. I can't think who it was, but I could see him. I was looking down the truck, and as I mentioned earlier on, you don't go in the back of a Formula One. No way would you go anywhere near the back of a Formula One team's truck. So I could see this driver down there, and I was kind of ducking around and trying to attract his attention. One of the guys, team guys, came down and said, "You're right, what are you doing?" I said, I'm trying to just get here. And he turned to me and said, "Well, just go in." And I thought, oh, can I do that? Can I actually go in the truck? Again, another team, I knocked on the door. It was WSR, West Surrey Racing. I was after one of the drivers. I knocked on the door and I heard, "Come in." So I opened the door. They were clearly in an engineering briefing. Now, if I, as a press officer for a team, had gone into my team's engineering briefing, I would have been shocked. You know, you just didn't go anywhere near. So as a journalist, to interrupt a technical briefing, a debrief, so I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And they went, "No, who are you after?" And I said, "I was just, you know, whoever it was." I went, "Oh, mate, go out and do the..." They sent him out of an engineering briefing to do an interview with me. I mean, that was just like, and I kind of thought, "Oh, I like this. This is going to be fun working here." So yeah, I get it. You know, as I said earlier on, Formula One is a lot more intense. There's a lot more call on their time. It's a higher level of imposition on them, and the media are, you know, we're very benign in touring cars. It's an entertainment formula. it's not an engineering formula like Formula One. We're never trying to catch the drivers out. We're trying to have a good time with them and make entertaining telly for people. And that's not always the case in the Formula One paddock. It can be a lot more political. It's a different media landscape, so you can understand why the drivers had to tread a lot more carefully through what can sometimes be a minefield.
That's so nice to hear, because I think the fans of the BTCC like the accessibility of it as well. You know, being able to go and speak to the drivers on the pit walks and all that kind of thing. So it's nice that runs all the way through onto the media side and any other side, I would imagine. It's just a very approachable series, which is great. Again, something's just popped up just on my vision here. Everyone loves Creasy. You must get on really well with him as well.
Creasy was Creasy first came into my my first time I came across Creasy actually was Jeanette had asked me to go down to Brands Hatch, to the first pre-season test at Brands Hatch, and just do a chat about my media and how to do interviews and all that kind of thing with all the drivers. So Creasy's there in the front row, did a little practice interview with him, and he's asking me loads of questions, and that was when he was first coming into doing the Supercar. We cut to the end of the season, and I'm doing the championship winners interview, and I can't remember, which says it all, and I do apologise to whichever driver it was, but it was I can't remember which driver had won the championship, but I was doing my interview with him, and he was being a little bit monosyllabic, and all I could hear behind was Creasy, Creasy, and there's Creasy down on the side. He'd won the AM championship. I've never, in all my time in touring cars, done an interview with an AM championship winner, but I just kind of had to go, because it was all the people, at home could hear was this chanting, and see this bloke bouncing up and down on the roof of his car like he'd just won the Formula One World Championship. So I kind of had to go and do the interview with him. I use Creasy as an example actually when I'm doing my media training, about the fact that people kind of think media training is about training drivers to say the right thing at the right time, and which it's not, because nobody wants that. We just want personality from people. And Creasy is an absolute classic example of a driver whose personality has got him to where he is. We want characters. We want personalities. That's what attracts everybody as a fan, no matter what the sport. So for me, media training is about teaching drivers how to get their personality across, because that's going to be the most important thing. Yeah, it's more than that. They need to understand how it all works and how they can get the most out of it. But it starts with having the confidence to get your personality across.
Yeah, brilliant. Obviously, we spoke to Creasy. We did an Instagram live with him from Donington. It was Donington. It was the first round of the season, which was brilliant. I just sent him a message. He was like, "Yeah, well up for that, mate. No problem," which is typical Creasy. But and he said the same thing. He said he was just going to be himself, and if people like it, great, and if they don't, fine. But also, we spoke to Jade Edwards as well, and she's very similar as well, isn't she? She just puts herself out there and just goes, look. But she works hard. She's worked really hard to,
really hard.
She's a great character as well.
Every driver has to work hard to get on that. Is that your dog barking in the background?
No, I think it might have been. No, I haven't got a dog, so it might be a firework going off or something. I'm not sure. Sound like a dog.
Every driver has to work hard to get onto the grid. But I like Jade. She's a great character. She's a good bird. I really like her.
Yeah, that's great, and it's great to see her in the BTCC. Obviously with Power Max, doing some great things, getting some drivers on board for the one-off, and obviously Jess Hawkins as well, which is great to see after so long without any ladies in the seat. It was
I think it's very difficult for any driver. And I guess Jade coming in, okay, she worked hard to get the coverage and to get the exposure as you would, because you want to maximize it. But I think it's very difficult for any driver, be it Jade, be it Jess, be it any of the other drivers that are sat in that Power Max seat that don't have prior touring car experience, with they have very little seat time. To learn how to race in, well, first of all, how to drive that car, how the championship works in terms of, it's a big ask to have a one-off drive and perform at top level. But good luck. Hopefully they will all, all of the drivers who've had seat time. We've got a new guy coming in for Brands Hatch. They'll be able to make the most of it and get something out of it.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, obviously, it's a great opportunity for people who want to be in the BTCC, of course. But as I say, it must be so difficult because you're flung in. It gets announced 10 days later. You're doing it full ballast in the first race. It's a tough thing to do. But no, it's great. And obviously gutted for Jack Constable, who wasn't very well. Was that Croft, wasn't it? I think it was that.
Yes, it was.
Yes, which is real shame. So hopefully he gets another crack somewhere down the line because he's a very good driver.
Yeah,
he is good. I'm just gonna have a quick flick through some of the questions here because there was one that did come up. Actually, I'm just going to dive back to Formula One. This is one of my friends actually. When I said that I was going to be speaking with you, this is something I've got a very hazy memory of. But he said, "Can you ask her about the interview with David Coulthard and the buttons on the steering wheel?"
yeah.
We haven't got to go into this too much if you don't want to.
No, the backstory to this was at the Canadian Grand Prix, the race before, which was at the Nürburgring. DC, it was when he was racing for Red Bull. He basically screwed up Red Bull getting their first ever podium position because he got a penalty for speeding in the pit lane. So, cut forward to the Canadian Grand Prix. I was doing a live interview with him before the race, and because I know DC could be a bit like chipper at times, so I thought I'll let him know I'm going to ask him this question so he doesn't think I'm being a bit like, ooh, you screwed up there, didn't you, kind of thing. Huge mistake, because of course then he forewarned his forearm. So when I said to DC my last question, you've been like with the pit lane speed limiter, DC looked at me and live on television and said, yes, I've been pretending it's your nipple and caressing it gently. And of course, like, where do you? I got my.
Remember that now, yeah.
My headphones on, and all I could hear in my headphones was everybody. So I'm listening when I've got my headphones on. Yeah, everybody in the what we call the gallery, which is both the director and the producers, and I can hear all of their chat, their microphones. I can hear them all howling with laughter. I could hear Jim Rosenthal and Tony Jardine was our presenter at the time, so they cut to a shot of Jim, and you could see like Tony's like was howling with laughter, and Jim was giggling away, and it was one of those things that you just kind of think, oh, why did I tell him I was going to ask him that? The funny thing was, though, that we talked afterwards. So I made page 3 of the Sun. DC and I were page 3 of the Sun, like, F1 driver makes racy comments about pit reporters' nipples. And it was interesting, actually, because some people said to me, oh, you must be really upset about that. And to me, DC I've known, the entire time he'd been in Formula One. Numerous drunken nights out with him at various different F1 parties. And he's a mate, if you know what I mean. And it was kind of two mates having a giggle, one mate having a giggle at the expense of the other one. And I suppose, in hindsight, it wasn't an inappropriate comment to make, really. But to me, he was just like taking the mickey, so it didn't bother me.
Yeah.
And but it was interesting, and as I say, I can understand why it was inappropriate, quite frankly. You shouldn't be talking about that kind of thing, but it just made me laugh. What was even funny was his mother. She wasn't happy. David, that's not very. You shouldn't have said that, David. That's not what he meant. You shouldn't. So I thought, forget what everybody else says. You're getting a load of grief from your mum here.
You've done wrong even as an adult when you're getting ticked off by your mum. You've done wrong.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely brilliant. I do remember that now. You mention it. Yeah. Just a quick one. On the hard compound, we do a bit of backing for some young racing drivers, and a couple are tuning in. Ralphie Ralphie Reeves, excellent young karting guy. I did say to his dad that I'd give him a shout out. He's involved with he's been involved with Team Hard in the past, and cracking. And he's just finished his season, and he's gone well. And he was 9th in the championship in the karting this year, out of 35, and he's done very well. So big thumbs up, big thumbs up to Ralphie.
Well done, Ralphie.
And I've just seen his dad. He's just said, he said that he grew up watching the BTCC on the fan side of the fence. And was always jealous of those in the paddock. And he says that he pinches himself daily that his little dude has got him on the other side of the fence. So that's lovely. It's just nice that he's been able to get inside the ropes a bit, and a bit for me as well on my side. I'm just a fan, but it's all gone rather well. So well done, Ralphie. Good man. Brilliant. Keep it going. And the other one, Ty Cuthbert, I know you're familiar with Ty.
Yeah, Ty likes to jump in on my interviews.
He does. He's in the background, lurking lurking in his overalls, which is great. He's done some like commentary and things like that. On social media. He said, "What age would you suggest media training is important for drivers? Obviously, it's never too early to start getting any budding drivers used to being in front of a camera."
Yeah, I think I'll tell you a story actually about when I first set up my media training company. I had a phone call from somebody who said, my 2 sons are karting. I'd like to get them some media training. So we had a bit of a conversation, and I said, how old are your sons? And I think there was something like 7 and 9 or 8 and 10 or something like that at the time. And I said, I think that's kind of a bit young, really. That's it was a guy called Adam Norris. Recognize the surname?
Yes. Yes. He's does he have a son who's done something?
Yeah, he's done all right for himself.
Yeah, rings a bell. Yeah.
I've worked with some young. I think that for me, most of the drivers, the young drivers who I work with, it's when they're making that step from karts up to cars. So I've just been running some workshops up at Simtrack, up at the Ginetta factory, which is a sort of preparing drivers who are going to be taking part in the Ginetta scholarship. You can see there's an interview process involved in that, and so I think there's stuff that karters can learn and can use, but there's not that much coverage of karting. My top tips for karters would be: don't stand with your hands behind your back. It's almost like somebody tells young karters, stand with your hands behind your back, so they look really uncomfortable. Nobody stands normally with their hands behind their back. And then they always ask them at the end, and who do you want to thank? And quite frankly, at that point, everybody switches off and stops listening. So my other top tip for karters is don't just say, I want to thank mum, dad, and blah, 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 because we've all stopped listening then. Build it into the story.
Excellent. Very good.
Result here, because I've got lots of people from sponsor X watching the race, and then it's a lot more simple than that sort of, I want to thank. Because as I say, we kind of all switch off and stop listening when people say that. So
yeah, but I must admit, I do.
I would say it's kind of when they make that move up to a level where there's going to be some media exposure, because I think it's a learned process. So, I could tell somebody something when they're 10, but if they never actually get to do an interview till they're 14, they're going to have forgotten some of it. But it's nice, actually. I mean, I was talking about the Ginetta scholarship. The instructor up at Simtrack now, James, I'm going to forget his surname now. I'm terrible at names, as people have seen from watching me doing interviews on touring cars, but James, it'll come to me. So the instructor at Simtrack, I first met when he was competing in Ginetta Juniors, and I did some training with him then. He then carried on up through James Kellett. He carried on up through the Ginetta ladder. He's won championships and is racing the British GT Championship now. And he was saying to some of the young drivers who were with us last week, he said, I still remember some of the basic things that Louise told me. I still put it into practice now. So it'd be interesting to see what comes out of that scholarship, because I mean, last year at that same session, one of the drivers who came along was Tom Leben. So he came and did our little training session beforehand, and now he's on the verge of potentially winning the championship. So
he's been very, very good this year, isn't he? Very, very good.
Yeah, he has. He's been very good. If he wins, he'll be the first scholarship driver to win the championship. So
I didn't realise that. Well, let's see what happens. Yeah. 1 round to go. Just a quick one that I did see pop up on my phone earlier on. Just going back to F1, I believe it was 2005 Indianapolis.
Yes.
With the whole tyre debacle. The message has actually just said, well done to the whole team for sort of bringing all that together, because it was a bit of an odd situation, wasn't it? No one really knew what was going on. It was like, what was that like? That must have been a bit, oh crikey.
Honestly,
a handful of cars in the race.
We were very lucky at ITV when we were doing the Formula One. We won 2 BAFTAs for our Formula One coverage. The race we should have won the BAFTA. was for that race at Indianapolis, because it was live TV at its best. So when you're doing a television program, you've got what we call a running order. So it's a basic kind of, you know, there's the intro, then there's this, then there's that. It's the order of what you're doing, and we, as we went on air, we basically ripped that up because we bust it the whole way, because we were following the story, and it was a developing story. So you've got Jim anchoring it, holding it all together. He's got Mark Blundell, who he's, you know, referring things to, and Ted and I were just excuse me, scurrying around the paddock trying to find out what was happening. The team principals were all in meetings, the races. So it was and it was one of those races where, you know, you had 6 cars started. Ordinarily, you look at the coverage of a race, you know, it's sort of, you start with an audience and it goes up for the start of the race, then it goes down again as the race goes on, and gets a bit dull in the middle, and then it goes up again for the finish. This one, it went up, and then it went up, and it went up, and it went up, and it went up, and it went, you know. So obviously word was spreading that this weird thing is happening out in Indianapolis, and more people were just tuning in to watch. And so it was, it's probably one of the television programs I've been involved with that I'm most proud of as a piece of live television. We did a bloody good job. So, and it was just an incredible story to be following as well. I mean, you wanted to slap some of them at times. Honestly, you just wanted to bang their heads together and say, you're looking like total pillocks here on a world stage.
Yeah.
You know, get your act together. And I loved Martin Brundle's comment afterwards. He said, what it needed is a woman to just go in there and sort it out. Just say, stop posturing.
Give him a gentle slap and turn to get on with it.
Back down. I thought, yes, absolutely. You're spot on, Martin.
I absolutely agree. It was absolutely amazing bit of TV, because I think everyone watching was thinking, what are they going to do with this? How on earth are they going to get through this? And it was absolutely brilliant. So, I mean, it doesn't mean anything coming from me. I'm just a bloke. I'm just a fan. But yeah, well done. It was absolutely brilliant. Very, very good. Good question just come up. Oh, this is a great question. Who do you think will be a future BTCC champion that was not yet won a race to date? Great question.
That's my mum phoning for some reason. Sorry. That is a good question. As with everybody, it depends what car you manage to get yourself to. Who do I think are the really good drivers who haven't won anything? Honestly, I think there are lots of that. For me, has been a change, and I've only been in touring cars a relatively short amount of time, but I think it's something I've noticed when I'm doing my media training sessions as well. You know, when I first started out, you spoke to the young drivers, what do you want to do? I want to be a Formula One driver. Nowadays, they all know it's so difficult to get to that level. And touring cars has become aspirational as a championship. And as a result of that, there are a lot of very good young drivers who are competing in touring cars. So I think there are lots of them. I think, I can't say one or two because I'll offend somebody if I miss them out. But
I'm sure everyone will understand if they're not mentioned. I'm sure, you can't name them all.
Great driver, Josh. Jake Hill, just going down through the list. Dan Camish, always won it last year. Honestly, I think there are so many drivers in that championship who could potentially be champions. But, it's a tough one. Tom Ingram, obviously.
Yes.
So many of them that could win it. That's my dog joining in.
Hello. I must admit, the first 4 names that popped into my head were Hill, Ingram, Camish, Cook. No disrespect to anyone else watching.
Yeah.
I've also, obviously, Creasy, everyone would love to see that. But I've always thought Sam Osborne, given the car, he's because he's off social media and he's very sort of quiet and everything, but I just think he's a guy, he can sneak under a radar. I think he's got something about him. And Bobby Thompson, I think they're my 2 as well. Bobby's very, very good.
Good drive. He's had some really good drive.
Yeah. Where are we? Oh, another tough question. How do you see the final race going? I mean, that could be How long's a piece of string, isn't it? That's that could be
I've
crazy.
always given up trying to predict. When I was doing the Formula One with ITV, we used to have a sweepstake. I never won it. I mean, largely because I always went with my heart rather than my head. And it was back in the Ferrari years when Schumacher was winning everything. So I would never in a million years dream of trying to predict what's going to happen in touring cars, because you just don't.
You just look at last year's finale, just as one example. You got no idea. I've given up.
Either way, enjoy every moment of it.
Yeah, just enjoy it. Don't try and pick a favourite. Just get on and just enjoy it.
Yeah.
Two very quick questions. One I saw pop up involving female drivers, or women racers. For the first time in 22 years, no female drivers have started the Indy 500. Any thoughts on that? That's from GoBobby.uk, and they sponsor a lot of young drivers. So well done to them.
I don't follow the Indy 500 that much, probably not as much as I should. For the first time in 20, I'm shocked. That's a big shame. I don't know why. I don't know the reasons. As I said, I don't follow the series, so I don't really. But that is, but that's for a championship to go backwards, for a championship that's always had a driver at least. That is a big shame. I mean, I'm a big fan of promoting women drive. I'm a big fan of equal racing.
Yes.
But I would like to see more women competing in the championship. It's a pyramid. Not that many girls start karting, so you're not going to get that many that make it up to the top. So many of the drivers that I work with in my training, when you say to them, "How did you get involved with racing?" They'll say, "Oh, it was a friend's 10th birthday party, and we went karting." Nobody takes their 10-year-old girls karting, So
good point.
If they're not starting, then there's less chance of them making their way up the ladder and getting involved. If you look at so many of the girls who do race. Jade being a classic example, Esme, they had family who were involved in racing, so they've grown up around it. So I personally think externally we need to change perceptions rather than inside the sport, because I think inside the sport, people just want the quickest driver. They don't really care whether they're male, female, black, white.
No, sure. We just go back to the Indy 500. I remember watching it when I was young. There was always, I think it was like Lynn St. James and I think Sarah Fisher, Danica Patrick, Pippa Mann, all these amazing drivers, and there weren't they this year. Just mentioning Pippa Mann and things about the States. Those who follow the page, we've been keeping an eye on Emily Linscott, who's been out in the States, doing incredibly well in the Lucas Oil School of Racing. She's just done an F4 test, so she might be the next, big rising star to hit the Indy 500. So we certainly hope so.
As the young sports person in the
inspiration class.
Times Telegraph, can't remember who it was.
It's
paper
the
it was,
Times, I think. Yeah, the sportswoman, Swati.
Yeah.
And she's been nominated for that, and rightly so. She's absolutely brilliant. And from what I can gather, she's mad as a box of frogs, and so is her dad. So I've been speaking to her dad quite a lot. So if you don't follow Emily Linscott, go and do that, because she's absolutely brilliant and she's going places. The other quick question on the women's side, what was your thoughts on the W Series? Because this kind of divides opinion, doesn't it? It's sort of is it more segregation or is it more opportunity for women racing? It's a tough one.
My responsibility is a bit of both. I fundamentally don't like segregation in the sport. I celebrate the fact that motorsport is one of the few sports where men and women can compete on equal footing. You've got motorsport, you've got horse riding, show jumping and all of that kind of thing, sailing, a lot of. There aren't many sports where men and women can compete on equal footing, and I think that's brilliant. I think you get equality by not seeing a difference between male or female. So on that level, I don't like W Series or the concept. Sorry, I don't like W. I don't like the concept of women only series, because you're the fastest driver with tits, big deal. Do you know what I mean? It's like when I was rallying, they would have a sort of trophy for the fastest women driver, and it's like, really? I finished second. you know, I take the check that went with it. Thank you very much, because that was useful for my budget. But what I do think W Series has done brilliantly is the awareness that it's created. I can absolutely get why the likes of Jamie and all the other girls who've competed in the series, you know, if somebody comes along, Alice Powell, classic example, hasn't raced for years, hasn't been able to get the budget. Somebody comes along and says, "Do you want to go racing?" Yes. Why would you? Absolute no-brainer. So I think W Series has done a brilliant job in terms of the promotion and raising the awareness of females participating, and in this instance competing in motorsports. So I absolutely applaud what they've done on that level. And as I say, I totally get why all of the girls have taken part, because honestly, any racing driver would, you know, bite the hand off somebody who says, "Do you want a free season of racing?" But as I say, my base starting point is that I think racing, I don't see why there should be a gender split. To me, it's not necessary. Shouldn't be necessary.
Yes, fully agree. Just very quick, I'm going to just move on very quickly because I know you've got plans and things to do. You're not just on the media side, you're a bit of a driver yourself, aren't you? I remember you were a co-driver for Mr. Jardine, weren't you, in a rally years ago? And you've done all kinds of racing and stuff. You've done all kinds of
things. Working for Tony, I was always saying, "Oh, God, give us a go in your rally car." He called me into the office one day and said, "What are you doing at the weekend?" I said, "Well, I don't know why." He said, "Well, because I need a co-driver for the Wydene stages." So his regular co-driver had pulled out. So I had a crash course in co-driving, and then off we went down to Wales, and I acted as his co-driver, which I loved, absolutely loved. And then cut forward to when I start working for ITV, and it's, you know, it's one of those lovely scenarios when suddenly you've got a bit more of a profile and people come along and say, "Do you want to drive our rally car?" So Ford, who were running the Ford Car Championship at the time, came along and said, "Was I interested in competing?" So I absolutely leapt at it. I went up to the Bill Gwynn Rally School. The lovely, now sadly departed Bill Gwynn, and his sons were running the school at the time as well. So I went up there and had lessons, and went rallying. So I did about 3 or 4 years, culminating in doing Wales Rally GP with Maurice Hamilton, who was the F1 correspondent for the Observer, as my co-driver. Third in class. We were podium finish. What an experience competing on the. I mean, obviously, I was in a teeny weeny car compared to the top guys, but it's like racing at Silverstone at the British Grand Prix. You know what I mean? You're competing on the same stage at the same time as the best drivers in the world. Martin Brundle was competing the same year as me, and I can remember there's a stage called Sweet Lamb in Wales, and Martin was saying that he got to the end of that stage and he just thought, "I was on it." When you get to the end of a rally stage, it's got like the times of, you know, the top times marked up, and I can't remember exactly what the difference was, but Martin was just like way off the pace. You just thought, how are these guys going so much faster than me? I was absolutely on it there. So I love rallying more than circuit racing. I did a couple of rallies with VBH, Vicky Butler Henderson, as my co-driver.
Okay.
We had such a giggle. We're just laughing the whole way around all the forest in Hampshire. So love rallying. Great fun.
I must admit, just from looking from the outside in, I've always said there's 2 types of racing rider that are just made of something different in their brain. Rally drivers are one of them. How can you go 100 miles an hour sideways towards a tree and just not bat an eyelid and just crack on? It's just nuts. And the motorcycle racing, the top, like the street racing on the Isle of Man, it's just like, what are you doing?
I was lucky enough to go to the TT a couple of years ago, and I have to say I was lucky enough to go on the grid there as well, and I've never been on a grid like it. I've been on a lot of grids, as you can imagine, but the silence on the grid at the TT, and as as I was walking on, so obviously the riders go off one by one, and as they go off, their team, family, loved ones have been there seeing them off, and just looking at their faces as they walk off the grid, it's like I could just have said goodbye to my husband, stroke son, stroke daughter, for the last time. It was like no grid I've ever been on before. It was eerie and almost spooky and
melancholy about it.
Yeah, I've rallied around some of the roads that they're competing on, and obviously a lot less speed. And I'm in a car, for God's sake. They're on a motorbike. The day it's just beggars belief. It really does. All credit to them. Incredible.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a photo I saw. I think it was from last year's. I forget who it was. I don't think it was Hutchinson. I can't remember who it was, but it was like there was a flint wall, and his helmet was literally there, and it's just like. And it's just unbelievable. Very quickly, before we go off, there's just a couple of things. Just going back, just a quick one. Do you manage to watch the races and the support packages on the BTCC, or are you busy doing interviews and other things and having a sandwich or something?
This person watch the program. I have to watch them. I do all the interviews afterwards.
I was going to say, yeah, you have to have an idea, but yes, you're obviously sitting there and having a watch.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, the way that it's working at the moment, it's absolutely relentless because I won't bore you with all the technicalities, but Steve doesn't have the same access to information that I have. He doesn't have the same cameras that I have to see what's going on. So I'm doing pretty much all of the support race interviews at the moment. Yes. I kind of flip one Steve's way so that I can do interviews with the touring car drivers for our next sort of grid slot. But other than that, I'm doing them all. So I have to say it has been relentless. Because I can't talk to anybody, as we can't go in the paddock. So I've got 101 different WhatsApp groups, and I'm just WhatsApping people the whole time to try and arrange the interviews. And so yes, I'll sit there and I'll watch the race. I can hear the commentary. I'm watching the timing screens, and then I'm making sure that the drivers are in position for the interviews afterwards. And
wow,
full on.
Very cool. Right, two more things, and I'm going to let you go. I promise. Really good question. You've been in motorsport for so long. I think that's meant in a good way. I'm sure it is. What keeps the fire burning? What makes you? Is it just a love of it? Have you just grown into the?
I love it. Just it's the same thing that made me want to sit on my dad's knee and drive the car around a car park in the New Forest when I was 4. I just like things with wheels and engines, and I love the. It's funny actually because when ITV pulled out of Formula One, I kind of thought, well, I thought you've got no job. That was a bit of a shock, but also that okay, you could do something different now. You could have a whole change of direction, and I just thought it's been my world. It's been my family, and I know it sounds like a bit of a bloody, bit of a cliche, but it really is. Yeah. It's very much a kind of family environment. I think when you work for a team, when you work in motorsport, be that an ITV team or an actual team, or so I think you have to love the sport because it takes up a lot of your time. It takes up a lot of your weekends. It's not a job; it's a way of life. So you have to love what you're covering. But hey, what not to love? The smell, the sound, and just the fun of the racing.
Yeah, brilliant. Final thing, something I remember. You were in a sorry about this. You were in a 2-seater Minardi with Mr. Alonso.
Yes.
And if anyone doesn't know what happened here, you were driven into by some bloke called Mansell.
Yes, I was not only in the first ever race for 2-seater Formula One cars. I was in the first ever crash for 2-seater Formula One cars.
How did that happen? How did he manage to do that?
That happened basically because. So, Paul Stoddart had the 2-seater Minardis, which kind of made me chuckle because I'd said to EJ, because in powerboats, there were 2-seater powerboats. I'd been in 2-seater circuit powerboats when I was working as a powerboat journalist. And I said to EJ back in the day, we should make a 2-seater Formula One car because you could take the fuel cell out, stick it. That was poo-pooed. And then, of course, first of all, McLaren came along and did the sort of side-by-side one. And then Stoddy came along and did his 2-seaters. So I was lucky enough to be invited along for that. Stoddy, bless him, and said, you can be in my car. And I a bit tough. I'd say, would you mind, Paul, if I went with Alonso? Because I just kind of thought he's quite good, that Fernando Alonso. He might be, one day. This was in Fernando's early days of Formula One. So and Paul managed to secure Nigel to come along, but the deal was that Nigel had to win. So it was a kind of stage race from a safety perspective, and it made sense from a PR perspective. Nigel was by a long shot the biggest name there, so it made sense. We'd get more coverage if Nigel won. But I genuinely think Fernando just wasn't counting the laps down, and we'd overtaken Nigel down the kind of the back straight at Donington, basically, and then we came around the final chicane, and obviously Fernando then saw the checkered flag and thought, oh shit, I'm not supposed to win. So he lifted. Right. Nigel, just having been overtaken, was probably quite incensed about the fact this young whippersnapper had overtaken him. So Nigel was right up our chaff. And when Fernando lifted, Nigel came into the back of it. So I kind of had no awareness of what was going on. I just felt a bang, and then there was like a shadow. You know, I now know it was Nigel's car pivoting on the sort of roll group, flying over backwards. So we came to halt, and I'm just my initial response was, "Mate, don't stop now. There's the line there." I'm quite competitive, so I was just incensed at the fact that we were about to win the race, and it's like, "Oh, Joe, we just lost the race." And so yeah, it was all very. Nobody, thankfully, was injured, but I did incur an injury later on. So we were all up on the podium, just for like a sort of photo op and spraying the champagne, and I was absolutely covered in champagne. It was all in my hair. So I bent down and went to flick my hair back, not realising that Fernando was standing behind me with an upended magnum of champagne. So as I flicked that, on the back of the head. So that was, and boy, was it painful for about a month. It was so painful. But I've still got the rear wing end plate. I got Nigel and various of the other, Fernando, various other drivers and some of the celebrities who were there on the day to sign it for me. It's hanging up on the wall in my office.
Oh, brilliant. Excellent. That's lovely. No, that's excellent. I didn't realise Nigel was supposed to win that race. That was brilliant. Yeah. Now you know. Fantastic. Well, we've taken up over an hour of your time, but we're going to wrap it up. But thank you very, very, very much for coming on. It's been absolutely amazing hearing all the stories and all the insights. No, it's been really interesting and yeah, absolutely fantastic. And I've just seen a comment which I'm going to read out, and I'm going to echo that. It says that you've done an amazingly good job this year with ITV Motorsport, and ITV Motorsport should be up for an award with what they've done with the BTCC this year under difficult circumstances.
Thank you.
We can all agree.
It's much appreciated. It's a great championship to work in, but I do know that we also get a lot of support. I love the passion of the BTCC fans. They are a great bunch, and they love their racing, and it's just great to have them on side. So thank you for that. It's really kind. Yeah,
here. Very good bunch of fans. Great. We're going to wrap it up. Thank you very, very much again. Very much appreciated. And when we're all allowed back to circuits, we'll try and come and say hello.
Good to see you there. Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you for the questions.
Thanks very much, Lou. Much appreciated. Enjoy your evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye.